I want to welcome everyone who's here today. My name is Stephen Weldon. I'm the director of this new minor in social data analytics. And I am very excited about this program. As we were talking before, it's something that's been in the works for a couple of years now, and now is finally online and ready to launch with official courses. As I'll go through, official courses that are required for the minor will be offered for the first time next spring. But courses that you've already taken for students who are interested already can be applied to the minor. And so we're sort of already rolling, which is really kind of cool. So I'm also pleased that we were able to get 4 fantastic speakers. These are all alumni from each of the departments that are here. There are 4 lead departments that have created this minor: economics, linguistics, philosophy, and political science. And we are very fortunate to have representatives from each of those departments who are using social data analytics and social data science in their own job and career. Some of that in research in academia, but a lot of it here in the private workplace. And I think that that's really important and something that appeals to students a lot. So with that said, I'm going to go give a little bit of overview of the program. And then what we're going to do is just turn it over to the 4 speakers, and I'll introduce them as we get there. So I'm going to share my screen here so everyone can see some slides. There we go. Okay, so that's a little bit of the background of the of this minor. I want to talk a little bit about the program overview, sort of the structure here. So we created this program explicitly for arts and social science students. This is something, data science has long been thought of as I think, an area for the disciplines of computer science and statistics, in particular, those 2. We've seen it sort of blow up with what some people refer to as the big data revolution. Where we have data that comes at us in real time and kind of a massive amount of that data. Some of those things are particularly important for policy initiatives. Some of those are cultural and social. Some of those are personal health related. And I think all of us understand and recognize how much data is out there, how much data is probably being collected about us as individuals. And, I think one of the reasons that we created this program is what I like to say is that data alone is not knowledge. Data is information. And what we want to do with this program is to give students the kind of skills, data analysis, sciences skills, to help understand and gain knowledge from this data. And the best way we think to do that is with a focus on theoretically driven and ethically sensitive research. And for students who then come from a major, whether that be economics or linguistics or another program, it gives them a kind of training in the background theory, and depending on the discipline, also kind of an emphasis on vulnerable groups and ethical responsibilities. And we think that that's really important. We think it's a really kind of critical way to not just be able to analyze data, but to gain knowledge from that data. So that's certainly a huge approach. We also, to some degree, want to focus on real-world social, cultural, and political economic challenges, sort of data-driven type policy research. That's an underlying emphasis to some degree. It'll be more in some classes than in others, but it'll particularly come together in what we're calling the capstone seminar, which I'll talk a little bit about. So here's the outline of the program. This is the basics. Students complete a minimum of 27 units of coursework. economics, philosophy, linguistics, and political science are part of that, but also many other departments: English, statistics, communications, geography. It's quite a few across the university, and they will be offering courses. The program starts, well, the program officially starts with fall term, and we have, I'll go into the application deadline, but the first kind of milestone here will be, other than the application itself, but from a course perspective, are two of the lower division required courses for the minor. These will both be offered in spring 2021, and they really should be on students' radar. So the first is Social Data Analytics 250, which is also Linguistics 250. It's a computational text analysis course. It's a course that's going to be offered by Maite Tsuboda from Linguistics, and I think it's going to be a really interesting and cool course. And then from philosophy, SDA 270, Data Ethics and Society. So those are two of the underlying core required courses, lower division courses for the course. And then, like I said, we're going to have a capstone project seminar. That's not going to be offered for the first time until spring 2022, so a year and a half from now. We do have some provisions in place for students who plan to be able to plan to graduate before spring 2022 that maybe want to do the minor or do want to do the minor. If that's the case, if you're listening and you're interested, I encourage you to contact me and we can talk about what the options might be. So these are the required courses. I've already talked about SDA 250, SDA Link 250, SDA 270, and a capstone project seminar. In addition to that, students have to take an introductory statistics course or econometrics course. There are three options here: Econ 233, Pol 201, and Stat 203. So you can take any of those, they all count toward it. And then you need to take an additional 12 units. And there's a full list of courses. I encourage you to kind of go through and look at SFU's calendar for this. And it's also possible to apply courses that maybe aren't listed there toward the minor, but that has to be approved by the director or myself. So again, that'd be something you would contact me about. First application deadline is coming up, September 30th. You can find all the details there. One of the things I want to say is that the number of applicants or the number of participants in the first year is going to be limited to 30. We hope to get 30 after the September 30th deadline. If not, we will likely do a call for applications again in the spring to get to that point. So keep that in mind. How will we admit students? So there are advantages for students who are declared majors and probably minors in the 4 disciplines of economics, linguistics, philosophy, and political science. But students are also eligible beyond those 4 disciplines. You'll be evaluated based on sort of your, for admission, based on your statement of interest and your, and how you sort of think that the minor fits with your current programs. And certainly one advantage would be that you've taken courses that we see as fitting with the minor. So we don't have any specific requirements. We do have a limitation of 30, so it is competitive, but there are spaces reserved, or will be spaces reserved for students from one of the four sort of founding departments, so to speak. Okay.
Steve, do you have this is Rebecca. Do you have a moment to take a question?
I sure do.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat. It says, hi, I saw that there's Pol 201. Is that so different from SA 257? I'd love to do this minor, but I have lots of sociology credits and no Pol credits at all.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So one of the things that's maybe not clear to students from this is, and what we'll be using as a criteria for that, for the statistical requirement, is that all 3 of those courses that are options here, so that's these 3 courses, they all teach introductory statistics in R. And that's a program, it's a statistical program that's used often in data science and data analytics. And so first of all, these three courses are clearly an emphasis on statistics. I don't know what the SNA, the details of the SNA class is. That's sociology and anthropology for others. I don't believe it's entirely based in statistics, but I could take a look at the syllabus. But I also am certain that it's not taught using R. That might seem like an arbitrary issue for students who particularly don't have experience in this area, but I think what you would learn is, as you gain more knowledge and experience, is, this is not everybody uses R, but a lot of people do, and it's becoming more and more common. So that not only gives you an answer that we probably wouldn't be able to count that course, but you can talk to me, and it might be a possibility based on what other courses you might have taken. But what we're really looking for here is a basic knowledge of statistics with some experience with the R program itself. Okay.
It says thank you.
Excellent. I can't see the chat myself based on my view here, but thank you for your question. And feel free to ask any questions. Thank you, Rebecca, for sort of monitoring this, and just feel free to raise those if I miss them. So I've already said all of this. September 30th, make sure it's on your radar. The application is on our website for the program. And yeah, I hope you apply. I think it's going to be a really great program. There's faculty across the university that are very pumped about this program. I think it's a great opportunity for students. And I think this is an opportunity here for you to also now, as we pivot and have our alumni speak, for them to kind of share how their majors and experiences and now the application of social data analytics or social data science is important to their careers in a variety of different ways. So let's see what I got here. So we have 4 speakers. From economics, we have Jorge Vasquez. I'll introduce them each individually when it's their turn to speak, but I just want to go through each of them first. From economics, Jorge Vasquez. From linguistic, Vasundhara GAUTAM. From political science, VANNA LODDERS. And from philosophy, KATHLEEN CREEL. Okay, and we're going to go through each of the speakers are going to have about 10 minutes to speak, and then we will open it up in the end after all that for additional questions. So Jorge Vasquez, he is was an economics and finance major from SFU, a joint major, graduated in 2013. And he is the practice lead of the eCommerce Digital Intelligence Analyst team, that's a mouthful, at Best Buy, Canada. He specializes in deep dive analysis using advanced analytics. He provides strategic insights and champions a data-driven culture within the department. I assume here we're talking about economics and possibly within Best Buy, I don't know. And like I said, he graduated in 2013. So Jorge, let me turn it over to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be speaking with all of you. I have prepared like a chat, 10-15 minutes for all of you guys. I hope that whatever I share with you guys is useful to determine if you want to pursue a career in analytics. I am extremely biased because, of course, I am in the field and I'm an analytics professional and I love it and I actually recommend it as a great career. But what I'll do is I'll basically tell you my story. I'll tell you like how I got to where I am, and I'll tell you more about what is that my team does at Best Buy. As you said, like that title sounds like a bit long. I'll give more clarity around what does actually digital intelligence mean and what is it actually that we do at Best Buy Canada. So as you said, Steve, yeah, I graduated with a joint honors in finance and economics. I had the opportunity to do 3 co-ops when I was at SFU. I did 2 co-ops at BlackBerry when it was a great company, and not now so much. Whenever I had a BlackBerry, I used to work there in 2009. I did 2 co-ops in the research and development department managing inventory devices. But then I decided that I wanted to try finance because I was a finance major. So I said, well, let's work in the finance industry. So I had the opportunity to be an intern in Bank of Montreal in the commercial banking division. It was a lot of fun. I met great people, but definitely like finance wasn't for me. So when I graduated, like I had all these skills, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I said, well, I really like technology. I like to like try new things. So I decided I want to go into startups. So I started networking like crazy in Vancouver until I was able to find a position in a small startup. We made software for helicopters and airplanes. And I loved it, right? I did all that types of jobs, but that was my real first introduction to like web analytics, which is what I do today. It was the first time that I was actually able to use data, take that information, and try to provide a better experience to users based on that, right? So almost like interpret that data, create a story, and find opportunity to say like, how should our website be organized? How should we try to sell our product to our customers based purely on numbers? So that was my first introduction. I loved it. We didn't have a lot of data. We were a very small company, not a lot of traffic to our site. And as it happens with most startups, like there was a risk of us going bankrupt, and eventually that actually happened. We went bankrupt. So I needed to find a new job. But now I knew this, I had all these new skills. I knew I wanted to go into data. So what ended up happening was that I applied to a job at Best Buy in the e-commerce department, and I got it. Not in analytics, because there was no analytics department yet, but in the e-commerce department, creating experiences for customers. So when you go to our website, we have actually teams of people that design that experience. We have UX designers. We have people that actually look at the data to say, where should like everything be placed? And we analyze that heavily. So I did that for a little bit, and I loved it, right? I started like realizing like, look, data is my passion. Analytics is where I want to go, right? I definitely want to pursue a career, but there's no team here in analytics at Best Buy. Luckily for me, they hired my career manager. He was hired 3 months after me to build the analytics department at Best Buy Canada. And as soon as they hired him, I came to him and said, how can I join your team? Like, I want to be an analytics professional. Help me be part of your team. And he told me, like, look, you look like a very smart guy. Like, people love you here at Best Buy, but you don't really have any experience in analytics. You need to really like show me that you can do the job. You can prove, you have to show me that you have the capabilities and the competencies to actually do the job of an analytics professional. So he started giving me a lot of tasks. And I started doing a lot of stuff on top of my day job. I was doing a lot of projects for him, trying to like show him like, look, this is my passion, this is what I want to do. And one of the funny stories and one of the biggest analysis that I did was I needed to forecast when was mobile traffic for Best Buy Canada, for our website, going to be higher on mobile devices versus desktop devices. And it's funny because I did that analysis in R, and I'm happy, Steve, that Steven, that you were talking about that just now. Because when I first learned R in school, I actually took econometrics. I think it's Econ 499, which I think is part of this major. It's one of the elective classes, and they were teaching me R. I was thinking, well, why are you teaching me this? Like, are you teaching me R because it's like it's an open source software and you don't want to pay for a license for Stata or like SPSS? And that was my first thought, actually. So like, they're just being cheap. They just want to save some money, and like that's what they're teaching me R. I enjoyed it a lot. I did my thesis on forecasting, actually. My thesis in that class was around forecasting Canada's GDP. And I thought like that's what they're teaching me until I started working at Best Buy. And I realized, and I was working on this project, and I realized, well, I built this forecast with everything that I learned in that class. I actually went back to my notes, went back to my old code, picked it up. I was one of the first people at Best Buy to ever install like RStudio in one of the laptops at Best Buy Canada. And that's one of the first introductions when you actually realize that actually R is extremely popular in the industry. All major technology companies publish code in R. They all maintain packages in R. Google, Facebook, Netflix. At Best Buy, like one of the dreams that we have is we actually want to build our own packages to start publishing and supporting the community because it is the standard. Of course, you have Python, you have Julia, you have SQL, which are also important, and my team actually does very strong in SQL and very strong in Python as well. But R is at the heart of what we do. And it wasn't there until I realized, okay, actually, I'm lucky that I learned R. I am very lucky that I was able to like spend 6 months just coding like crazy and getting those fundamentals to actually do this. I was able to then, with those projects, I did a lot of more than just one project to eventually convince my manager, and he said, okay, you proved it. You can do analytics. You have what it takes to be a good analytics professional. Fast forward 5 years into the future, and now I'm the practice lead of 4 communities. So I lead a team of around 20 people. So we're talking about, when I say communities, I mean like specialties within analytics, because there's many different types of careers in analytics that you can follow. So I lead BI developers, I lead data scientists, I lead data analysts, and I lead digital analysts. And I do all of this within the e-commerce and technology department, because there's other analytics teams within Best Buy. We're a massive company, but we are the biggest analytics team currently. So just to like give more clarity around what is it that we do, right? What is analytics from a professional standpoint? Like what, if you were to do analytics in the private sector, what does that mean? So in the simplest definition of what we do, we enable decision-making through data. We take extremely complex problems and we make them simple so that like a VP or a product manager can make a decision and say, yep, I'm gonna go with this because data says, let's move in this direction. And in terms of examples, more clear examples, let's talk about, for example, the most common one that like when people think analytics, they think is like algorithms, right? We actually do build a lot of algorithms. We have a price optimization engine that we're working on right now. In fact, I think someone in the audience, he's an intern in my team right now, and he's working in that project as we speak. And actually Jared, his name is Jared, if you guys want to say hi to Jared. And basically what we're working on is we're building like, we're building a way of predicting what is the, not predicting, but like what is recommending what is the optimal price for a product given like multiple dimensions that we see in, right now. Like, so what is Amazon's price? Like what was the price last week? How much inventory do we have? Like what are the features of this product? Like how much should we charge for this? What is the optimal price? It's a very complex problem, extremely interesting, right? So that's one of the set of problems that we work on. Like the very common type of problems is they're very heavy on the math. You have to be very heavy on the statistics, very heavy on the programming, right? So like definitely like having like a background in data science helps a lot when you're working those type of problems. But we work on other type of problems like insights. And regular insights is more a question like, let's say, for example, a product manager will come to you and say, hey, Jorge, I need to optimize our cart. I need to optimize, like when people go to bestbuy.ca, like, are there any opportunities for us to work on that part of the website? And what we do is we actually look at a lot of data, like bestbuy.ca, we have so much data. We have over 200 million visits a year to Best Buy. And for every visit, we collect up to 300 to 500 data points, something like that. We collect 5 terabytes of data per day just on our website. Just so you imagine like the volume that we manage. And that all that data, we can condense that to say, you know what, there is an opportunity in this page. You're losing a lot of users moving to this page, and we can actually segment who those users are and make it like a bit more tangible and be like, and work so that we can give that to a UX designer for them to like build a solution. So that's the insights part. But we also do dashboards, right? And a dashboard is just an interactive report, an interactive portal that we give to stakeholders like VPs or like business users, business owners, for them to explore the data themselves. But to do that, you need to be really good at organizing your storytelling in these reports. You have to be really good at doing data visualization, which is one of the things that like I would have loved to learn when I was in school. Actually, I had to learn all data visualization on my own, reading books, going to seminars, going to conferences, and we actually have our own best practices at Best Buy that every analyst has to follow. But I was just looking at the program, and it actually has a data visualization class as part of the electives. I would have loved to take one of those classes because I cannot tell you how important it is to convey information fast to a stakeholder. You have a vice president. This vice president has 5 seconds. He needs to understand your data and your insight in 5 seconds, and that only a good data visualization professional can do it, right? So having that type of knowledge around like what is the best way to convey through graphs and through like colors, we actually pay a lot of attention to colors, sizes is extremely important. So we do dashboards. But one of the things that I actually love the most about my job is that we actually own the experimentation program for Best Buy Canada. And we actually do a lot of experiments, both online and at the store. So when we say like online experiments, think about, right now we're doing some experiments. I cannot disclose what they are because otherwise you're going to ruin the experiment if you know that you're in an experiment. So I cannot disclose that. But think about things like, for example, the copy. When you go to a checkout, like to the checkout page, having different like ways of conveying information on like, hey, this is your login, or hey, this is the shipping cost. Small things like copy make a big difference for users, right? And we've done tests where we, for example, take 50% of our visits to a website, see one version of the copy, the other 50% says a different version of the copy, and then we measure what is the impact afterwards, and we use different statistical techniques to measure that, depending if it's like, depending on the type of metric that we're looking at. But I can tell that like we found in certain occasions, we've made gains in revenue of over $10 million just by changing one sentence on the website. That's how important it is, and that's how important experimentation is. We manage the experimentation funnel for Best Buy, the best practices. I was lucky actually that when I was at SFU, actually took experimental economics as one of my classes. It is part of one of the electives as well. I cannot tell you how much fun it is to look into experimentation, type of experimental designs, making sure that what you're proposing makes sense. There's multiple types of experiments that I learned a lot when I was in SFU. I've learned a lot more now that I'm outside of SFU in terms of how can you do like a factorial experiment, a full factorial experiment. And there's so many different designs, so much craziness that is out there. But having that foundation made a big difference for me to actually help set up this program. The other part about experimentation that we actually do, which I like it as the online, but it's actually, I find it a little bit more fun, is when we do experiment at the store level. When we do experimentation, actually we experiment at the geography level, because that requires different types of statistics, different types of randomization. At the website, it's very easy for us to randomize users. At the geography level, it is way harder to do it, right? Because you cannot randomize, like if you go to a store, it is very hard for me to randomize you and be like, okay, you go here and you go here and you see a different store. It's actually very hard. So we actually have to use different techniques. And one of the cool things is that like, we actually are doing a lot of techniques in causal inference. We do a lot of causal inference. And what we're doing there, what we do in Best Buy is based on a paper by two economists written in 2003. They do something that is called synthetic control methods, which are becoming extremely popular. They're very popular in economics. And basically, that paper that I'm talking about, and I actually recommend that you go read it if you're interested, is a paper that talks about how to measure the impact of terrorism in GDP. So what these two Spanish economists did, they're great economists, I think they're in MIT and Harvard. What they did is they actually said, well, look, in Spain in the 1960s and 1970s, there was a surge of like terrorist attacks by by groups that wanted the independence of the Basque region. Right? If you guys go, it's called ETA, that's the name of the group. And what these economists did is like, well, can we estimate what is the impact of these attacks on the overall GDP? Like, is investment, are we losing investment? Are we losing opportunities by having this happen in our country? So what they did is that they broke Spain into all the different like communities. It's like the Comunidad de Madrid, Comunidad Valenciana. They broke into all these different communities and they built an experiment, a natural experiment. And they said, let's try to forecast what the Basque region should have grown had it managed the same growth as the rest of Spain. That method is known as a synthetic control method. We at Best Buy use this exact same method to understand what is the impact of launching new things at the store level. As in, like, we're going to launch a new type of channel to serve our customers. We actually use the same mathematics behind that to do that. And we're actually modeling our experiments based on that. Of course, we've evolved a lot based on that. We actually use papers, not only on that 2003, but papers that are almost like, the last one that we use is economics that were published like, I think, June 2020. So we're using actually like very new research. But my point is that like, we're doing stuff that is very related to academia in the private world. Like you would imagine that like, oh, like what am I learning about all these methods to like learn about this public policy or like how vaccines impact these demographics or how like these taxes impact this demographic? Well, actually, we're not doing exactly that problem, but the method is exactly the same. You just need to understand the business problem to apply it. And that's what we do as a lot. And I saw that the minor actually has a class that I didn't take, but I would have loved to take around causal inference and measuring the impact of public policy. That stuff, I can tell you, especially for retailers or people that are trying to measure what is the impact of their initiatives at not at the online level, that is the type of mathematics that is actually becoming extremely popular. I can tell you that Google, Facebook, Netflix, all of them are doing a lot of research and publishing packages in R just to solve this unique problem. So like that classes, extremely useful, super useful. But I want to leave you guys with one final thought, hopefully, and after this you learn about what is it to be an analyst professional, what is it that we do, is that I've talked a lot about the technical skills necessary to be successful. And I've talked a lot about that. And you need the technical skills. You need to be you need to be able how to program, you need to be able how to like understand statistics, like explain results. But I don't want to like take any credit from what it is to be a good storyteller, be a good communicator. Because as much as like we do a lot of like this fancy math and we do all this cool programming and all these crazy visualizations, being able to convey our insights is as important. So in my team, we would easily spend 50% of the time just pulling the insight, just doing the analysis, doing the modeling, doing everything, and the other 50% of the time just refining how we're going to communicate, refining to make sure that our stakeholders understand what is that we mean. Because if we use an extremely complex method and they don't understand what you did, they will not use it. They will not take your recommendation. You need to be able to convey that understanding of what is that what's done. So as you guys go into a career in analytics, I think like you guys as most of you guys are a Bachelor of Arts, are in the arts faculty. That communication and all of those courses that you take, and I know this minor also has courses in communication. Do not think that is not important. It is extremely important. And when you're looking for a career, at least in the private sector, I think you can use that to your advantage to make yourself more useful and more unique within the market. I can tell you that in my team, actually the latest hire that we have, a senior analyst, he is a history major with a focus on, I think it's Middle Eastern and studies, and he's a senior analyst in analytics. But you can tell that his communication skills impact how he works as an analyst. I can tell that, yeah, he is a great coder, he understands the math, but I can also tell how he organizes his presentations, that he's a critical thinker, that he's a great communicator, and that makes a massive difference. Because just to like share like some stats that I was just pulling myself, I am guessing that there's at least 1,000 people every year that graduate with a degree related to analytics in Vancouver alone. Like UBC has 2 master's degrees, we heard from that. SFU has the master's in big data. There's the BD School of Business certificate in analytics. There's this program, Langara, Douglas, everyone has master's programs in analytics. There's a lot of them. All of them are extremely focused on coding, programming. There's a lot of people that can do Python, R, statistics, there's a lot. There's very few that can actually take that and can communicate that properly. And I think that's an advantage that you, within the faculty, you should take advantage as much as possible, right? Bringing that diversity of thought makes a massive difference, right? So I only have like this guy that is history major. I also have like sociology majors in my team. I have communication majors in my team. And so some of them, like one of them, like I saw her at case competition at SFU. She's had a PR background, such a good communicator that I thought like, that's good enough for me. I'm going to coach you on the analytics side. I'll train you all the analytics stuff, but just being a great communicator is what I need right now, and you have that. So don't underestimate that part as well. Of course, the math and all that stuff is important, but to be a complete professional, the storytelling is really important. So yeah, so that's my story. That is the story of my team. That's the story of like that I wanted to tell with you, and I'm happy to hear about the other speakers and of course your questions afterwards. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Jorge. That's fantastic. You're like just a spokesperson for this minor. I think you highlight all the key points that we were trying to make about it. So I really appreciate that. Our second speaker, we're going from economics to linguistics, also with in computer science, and that is Vasundhara GAUTAM. She does linguistic analysis on speech data, and she writes code to improve the quality of speech recognition at a company called Dialpad, where she works as a speech recognition engineer. She joined the company in 2019. I think she also finished her degree in 2019, so recently, with a joint major in linguistics and computing science. And with that, Vasundhara, I turn it over to you.
Great. It's really great to be here. And I'm so excited to see that there's so much interest in this new minor program. I'm going to share my screen because I made one slide. I was encouraged to make a slide that contained the sort of SparkNotes version of what I was going to talk about. So essentially what I want to cover today is I want to talk about my trajectory, how I got into computing science and linguistics, what I did when I was at SFU, because like Steve said, I just graduated last year, and then how that has been useful in my career here at Dialpad. And there are a lot of parallels I think you'll find between what I did when I was at SFU and the SDA minor program. I also want to warn you all that I have been, today's like my fire alarm testing day apparently. They only recently put up a warning in the elevator. So if the fire alarm goes off, and I'm hoping that it doesn't because I'm hoping that they're on a lunch break now, then I probably will just mute myself for a few seconds till it stops. So yeah, I am somebody who has always been interested in interdisciplinary studies. Right from when I was in elementary school, I was always interested in the sciences and the humanities, and I could never pick what I wanted to do. So much so that in grade 11 and 12, I actually switched to a whole different school board from the Indian school system to the IB because I didn't want to have to pick an area of specialization so early. So that's what led me to SFU, and I knew that SFU had a joint major program in computing science and linguistics. I knew that obviously this was interdisciplinary. It contained sort of math and statistics, but also language data and, you know, writing papers and your communication skills. All of that stuff is really important. And I really loved it. It was a fantastic program. It really got me to understand that solving problems like machine translation, so creating something like Google Translate, is actually not easy. A lot of these things that we take for granted, like the, you know, using Siri and Alexa and Google Translate, and even spam filtering on your emails, all of that stuff is actually, there's a lot of technical expertise and a lot of thought that goes into it that we may not always be aware of until we're actually doing it. And that was what actually motivated me to join this program in the first place. I remember using Google Translate in high school because I took French in grade 11 and 12. And I thought it was so bad. I was like, I can speak French better than Google Translate. Like, what is this? And so I remember thinking to myself, I wonder what's behind this. I should study that and just like fix Google Translate. And then that's what brought me to computing science and linguistics. And well, it turns out it's actually really hard. So my goals are certainly more realistic now. And then at SFU, I had the opportunity to work at the phonological processing lab as a research assistant, and the discourse processing lab also as a research assistant. Both of those are labs that are under the linguistics department. And the second of those is directed by Dr. Maite Taboada, who is, by the way, teaching the text analytics class that I think Steve said was being offered in the spring. She's fantastic. She is someone who is very much interdisciplinary like me, is into computational linguistics and discourse processing. And so I highly recommend taking that. Well, you have to take that class with her, of course, but I highly recommend her anyway. She's a fantastic person. And both of these pieces of experience at both of these labs taught me a lot about research methods. And specifically at the discourse processing lab, I worked on a bunch of different projects that are pretty similar to the kind of capstone projects that you might do in this minor. So the two that I want to highlight are TACT and the Gender Gap Tracker. TACT was a project that was on online comments on news articles. So we took a bunch of different news outlets, Canadian news outlets, and we examined the articles and examined the comments and essentially measured the constructiveness of comments and the toxicity of comments. And we tried to do analysis on this to try and figure out what are the patterns. When someone is being constructive and criticizing an article, are they always, you know, not swearing at the person, or is there some kind of more complex interaction there between those two things? And our results are very interesting. I think there's a bunch of things on her website, on Dr. Taboada's website about this project. So I encourage you to go and read it. But this was one of the first projects that I did with her where I very much used text analytics skills to process over 1 million comments. You know, it's one thing to be able to look at maybe 50 comments, maybe it takes you a couple of days, and to, you know, annotate them and go through your data and make some assumptions. But when you're scaling up to a whole bunch of different news outlets, to a whole bunch of different articles, and you want to make assumptions at scale, or you want to test your hypotheses at scale, that's when you really need the analytics component. That's where it becomes super important to know how to program and to be able to do that to handle large quantities of data. So that was kind of my introduction to that in a more formal environment. And the other project that I worked on that was pretty big and that is still going on, but I'm no longer part of it, is the Gender Gap Tracker project. So that was a project where, again, with Canadian news outlets in the English language, we were trying to quantify how often women are quoted compared to men. And this is an important thing, and our results basically show us that men are 3 times more likely to be quoted as women are in Canadian news, and that's obviously disappointing and bad, given that women are 50% of the population, slightly over 50% of the population, in fact. And so this is, again, a very computationally complex project where it's not just the skills in terms of your being able to program, but it's also your linguistic skills, knowing how do you use computers to analyze something as complex as the language we use. So just to give you a few examples, it's not, when you have a quote in a news article, it's not always as simple as Mr. Justin Trudeau said, comma, open quote, blah, 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 close quote. It's often you have pronouns. So you could have he said, or she said, or they said. And you could also have partial references. So you might not say Mr. Justin Trudeau, you might just say Trudeau said. And there's a whole bunch of different words that you could use as well to describe that action of saying. You could say, you could say claims, you could say reported that, alleges that. And so you have a whole lot of linguistic complexity that the linguistics part of my degree really came into and was super important in helping us tackle this project. And I also had an 8-month internship at GE Digital. That was a pure software engineering internship that I haven't listed on here because I think that was more just cementing my technical skills, but it wasn't as much this, this confluence of computing science and linguistics. And it's not as much in the spirit of what the SDA minor is all about. So I think all of that experience allowed me to start work at Dialpad right after I graduated, so in May last year. And at Dialpad, I am a speech recognition engineer. And what that means is essentially that I work on speech recognition. So if you've ever used something like Alexa, Google Home, Siri, then you have interacted with a speech recognition technology. And what we make at Dialpad is we make something that is like Skype. It's a voice over IP product, but it also has a layer of AI on top. So the layer of AI allows us to do speech recognition while people are talking, to transcribe the whole conversation. And also once the conversation has ended, we point out like the action items. Like maybe you said, I'll give you a call about it tomorrow. Then it highlights that at the end so that you can put it in your calendar. So it's obviously been very fulfilling work because it is, again, this confluence of computing science and linguistics that I've always been very interested in. And I have to say, like the SDA minor, having looked at it, like if I were to go back to school, I would definitely do it because it is exactly the sort of thing that we do here at Dialpad and also that we look for in future candidates. For our positions, we look for that interdisciplinarity. We look for that ability to combine quantitative methods as well as qualitative methods. So everything that Jorge was just saying completely resonated with me. We have people from a lot of different backgrounds. It's not all people who have actual training in computing science and linguistics. We have, people who have backgrounds in physics who've studied like Egyptian hieroglyphics. So we have like a whole bunch of different backgrounds. And I think what the place where we all come together and we're able to look at large quantities of data and analyze them, that's where it matters that we have different experiences and we have different ways of looking at things and we are educated in different ways of problem solving and data analysis. So yeah, pretty much. I would also say that I particularly like the focus and I guess the call out of the ethics of applications of data analytics. That is something that we don't really talk about a lot as an industry. And especially in tech, I think tech is relatively a new industry on the scale of things. And so we don't necessarily have the same sort of ethical guidelines as some other industries do. So it's an ongoing conversation. And I think I actually made a presentation just 2 weeks ago at work about ethics in the field of natural language processing. And too often we sort of focus on this question of how can I make things equal for different people? Like how can I make my facial recognition perform as well for the faces of Black people as the faces of white people? And not often enough are we asking the question, should this technology be built at all? So, you know, should I make a classifier that classifies whether people are men or women? And you know, should I have a classifier? How does that perpetuate harms, or how does that perpetuate existing stereotypes about people, that you can predict someone's gender from their name, for example? And so I think it's super important to have that piece as well. And that's why I'm really glad that this is a program that's being offered under the umbrella of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, because I think we have a lot of that. We have a lot of that, you know, nuanced discussion in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. We have the communication bit, the argumentative writing, and you know, being able to present different sides of an argument that we don't necessarily have in computing science. And the ethics part of it is, I think, very important. And yeah, I've looked at the design of this major, of this minor, and I'm really excited about it. So I hope you're all considering it very seriously. So yeah, pretty much I am happy to chat about anything that you want to chat about. I have some social links up here. I am always happy to chat about like my trajectory that got me here, how you might be interested in discovering more about computing science and linguistics. Maybe you're not so sure about your programming skills, and you want tips on, you know, what websites to go to, what online courses to do to improve those. Or just generally, if, you know, anything you want to chat about, I would be happy to talk about. So yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Again, so interesting. Like I have a pretty good job as a professor. I'm not gonna lie, it's a great gig. But as I hear each of you talk, I think to myself, that's a job I'd like to do. Like that's really interesting. Or if I was an undergrad at this point in time, and so many interesting angles to it. So, okay, so one of the other things I should say is when we following up a bit is we know that there is an extremely high interest in text analysis and language processing from students who are potentially doing this, which is really cool. So, and that's why we're excited that it's a central part also of the minor itself. So for students who want to sort of specialize in that, there's many opportunities to do so.
Okay. Our next speaker is from
political science, VANNA LODDERS, who graduated with an honors degree in 2018, I believe, and just recently finished her master's with distinction here, also at SFU. She is a research analyst working at Innovative Research, which is a national market research and public opinion polling firm that's based here in Vancouver and Toronto. She relies heavily on the knowledge she gained while completing her master's here in political science. She does things like write surveys, model and visualize data, introduce projects related to public affairs, so we're kind of working with companies and public organizations, as well as investment, financial markets, energy distribution, so kind of many different types of tasks. And she has a particularly strong interest I think as a political science major, but also some of her projects that she did for her honors and her master's in social media data. And she also has a love for the fiber arts, as I've learned. So anyway, VANNA, thank you so much for being here. Please take it away.
Hi, everyone. So as that was a good introduction, but my name's VANNA. And I started at SFU in 2015, so really not that long ago. And I think I graduated my undergrad in 2018. It's all a blur because I bridged the two over. I did the accelerated master's program, so it's all just become one big block of time. But I just actually defended my master's project in April of this year. So I was really lucky I was able to still do that with everything going on and defend online, which was great. And that project is a pretty good example of why I'm very thankful for the courses I was able to take here, specifically in methods, quantitative methods. I also took qualitative method courses. and specifically really interested in text analysis, which at the time that I was taking my courses, there was less of a clear path as to how to kind of learn more text analysis skills. But I was able to use the foundation I got in the political science department to kind of jump off on my own and get the skills to be able to learn those things myself, which was really valuable, and kind of continue growing with that over both of my degrees. So yeah, I started in fall of 2015, but I took my first methods course in the fall of 2016 with Steve, which was Paul 201. And interestingly, in high school, I actually took I was in a science co-op. So I was in like a pre-calculus and science co-op group. And that's all I took. I really loved taking natural sciences and mathematics. But at the same time, I also took all of the humanities and politics courses. And it was really difficult for me to kind of choose what I was going to do in university. And I went with political science off the bat, and little did I know I would be able to kind of bridge the two together through my degrees, which is really valuable to me. I never really realized that I could apply those same principles as a social scientist and get to study, you know, the topics that I was interested in, but still be able to stay in that quantitative space, because that's always been really natural for me and always appealed to me. So I was really pleased when I took Paul 201. And after that, I think I exhausted every methods course in our department. And I'm really glad that I did for a number of reasons, which I will get into. But after taking pretty much every our methods course, and particularly Paul 201 was the jumping off point for me. Because shortly after that, I worked as a research assistant for Steve, which again, super valuable to me, and kind of encouraged me to keep going in this direction, which I'm really thankful for. But I was able to do that. I also was able to start TAing for Paul 201, so introductory quantitative methods, during the end of my undergrad and through my master's degree. And there's no better way to make sure you know something than to teach it. So I was really lucky to be able to do that. And that's where I learned R for the first time. And I know we've mentioned R, and R has been so valuable to me as I've graduated and moved on, because as a social scientist, a lot of folks that I've heard from in other universities or other programs maybe who haven't learned R, it really gives you an edge, even from other people at my company that I work at now, who kind of followed a similar path, but kept with SPSS or Stata originally, and then are having to kind of learn R on their own down the line, and that presents a challenge. So learning R early on and having that kind of be my primary language has been really great for me. And again, I'll get into that in a moment when I talk more about what I do now. But being able to TA really early as a result of taking those courses. And I ended up actually teaching workshops on R through the library, which you should take when they're available. I know with COVID, things are a little different. I'm not sure if they're doing them online. But the library often offers a lot of awesome workshops and one-on-one help with R as well for grad students. But I think workshops I did a lot with undergrads as well. So I'd really encourage you to look at those if you're going to keep going with the program. But that was really valuable as well, to be able to keep learning those things. And most importantly, taking these courses and having this knowledge, I was able to get a job before I even graduated. Which is now my current job that I've transitioned to full-time, and I'm very lucky to be able to work from home. So when I believe I started working at Innovative in, it was September 2019, and I defended in April of 2020. So I spent a decent amount of time just working part-time at Innovative and finishing my degree. But how lucky am I that I got to have a job before I graduated, and I didn't have the time after where I was concerned about finding something. And I truly believe that has a lot to do with my experience and skills in statistics and data visualization and text analysis in particular was a huge reason why I was brought on at Innovative, because that was a special interest of mine. So it's really awesome to see that the program's actually focusing on text analysis too, because it really gave me an edge among other people that work in my company as well, and being able to kind of spread that to other people that I work with now is really great. So I'm glad that's a focus of the program. So one of the main things that I've done at Innovative, which just in a general sense, it is a market research and public opinion polling company. So on the one hand, we do our own public opinion polling, like around elections in particular, we do a lot of polling. But we also just do weekly, actually, polls, national polls within Canada on a variety of topics, depending on, you know, what's going on in the public sphere and the political world. So we do that. We've done a ton of polling around COVID, which has actually been really interesting for me. I wasn't expecting that when I switched to full-time, that would be the world that I was working in. But it's actually presented a lot of interesting data problems for me to engage with. So we do a lot of that type of polling, but a large portion of our work is client work, market research work for our clients. And at the end of the day, the kind of core goal for all of our clients is to solve some sort of problem and to give them advice in order to improve something, i.e. save money, get more donations. We work with philanthropic organizations. How can they best leverage whatever type of campaigns they're doing to increase donations? I work with a lot of financial regulators. We do a lot of campaign testing for communications, which is great too. So we do a really large variety of things at my work, depending on our clients. But most of what I do involves writing surveys, writing survey experiments, which is a lot of fun. I love doing those. So I do that. I write proposals for clients. I design the in-depth reports that we end up giving to clients. So a lot of data visualization, which luckily we actually did quite a bit of in the courses that I took in the political science department, which has been awesome for me as well, because that's a huge bonus to having strong data visualization skills kind of across different mediums, R being one of them, which is really helpful just because it's so flexible. So I do a lot of report writing, both quantitative and qualitative, which I didn't necessarily expect I would end up doing, a lot of qualitative work, but I'm really glad I took those courses as well, because I'm able to kind of bounce between the two and merge them together, bridge them together. I do a lot of automated coding and a lot of regression modeling and visualizing regression modeling, which is actually a big thing at my work recently. And I've been able to introduce some kind of different models from what we were doing before, and I learned all of that, or I kind of learned the foundations for all of that in my introductory statistics courses, and combined that with my data visualization skills to improve that as well. And yeah, I write, focus group guides, I do reports for focus groups, all sorts of things, which is really great. But one of the primary things I got hired to do was improve automated coding. When I started, all of our coding was done by hand, completely manually. So we ask often, open-ended probes on surveys, and we want to be able to code them. We used to send that out to a coder who would do it manually. So, 1,000 verbatims might be a 6 to 8 hour coding task, and I've got that down to about 45 minutes, which is great. From my boss's perspective, because I'm saving us a lot of time and money. But it's also really fun for me to be able to do. And I've been able to introduce a lot more different types of sentiment and text analysis as well, which I learned all the foundations for in my time at SFU. So really my entire job from start to finish, everything I do, I learned in methods courses across both of my degrees. I'm not quite sure what I would be doing if I hadn't taken those because it's just, I absolutely love it. And I'd like to kind of jump off a point made earlier about the communication skills being so important. So it's one thing for me to be able to run regression models and output some really nice data visualization and send it to my boss and say, here you go. But the story is certainly not over there because we need to be able to communicate this to people who aren't in statistics or data science. So that is a huge aspect of my job, is communicating findings in in-depth reports or very short executive summaries that require me to do it in very few words or with, you know, virtually no copy on the page and entirely through visualization, depending on the task that I'm doing. So being a social scientist and having this type of experience in statistics or data visualization, data science, being able to bring those two together is so powerful in my opinion, because we don't have a bunch of different people on our team doing so many different things. We mostly have a lot of social scientists with strong data science or programming skills. Even our programmers are mostly social scientists. So it's really great that, you know, to kind of have that all in one, and to be able to actually have a minor that has a name on it is so helpful as well. I, like others have said, if I had the opportunity to take it, I'm sure Steve knows, I definitely would have taken it because that would have been absolutely my cup of tea. So I'm jealous of everyone, but really glad that you're able to do this because I think having the minor that like explicitly shows these efforts that you've had is super, super helpful as well. So that's really great. I think the program is going to be awesome. I'm sure people will take advantage of it, and I hope they do. But that, I think, is everything I wanted to mention. Mostly just that, yeah, overall these courses have just given me everything I needed to bring my two, you know, true interests together, which was politics and public opinion, and math and science, and bridging those two together has been, I never knew, you know, 5 or 6 years ago before, or when I was just starting university, I never knew that that was an option for me, or that I never thought I would have a job as a, you know, research analyst or data scientist. And I'm so thankful that I do. It's really a joy. So I'm very pleased that everybody will have these opportunities, and I hope everyone takes advantage of them. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'm not sure if anybody has, or anybody will be sending out our emails or anything, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if you're interested in what we do more. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Vanna. I think I'll be able to maybe, if you want to talk with one of them, if one of the speakers, you could probably get a hold of them through myself, or the information that Vasundhara shared. We have a way. Thank you for offering that, by the way. Fantastic. Okay, we have one more speaker. We're going to pivot to philosophy. I'm so excited that philosophy is a part of this program. I'm a firm believer that students should be taking more philosophy courses, and not just in ethics. In fact, maybe ethics is the lowest of my personal belief about why students should be taking philosophy courses. But nonetheless, they will be offering, one of the courses they will be offering is a core course in data ethics and society. But they're also offering several other courses, causal logic, a bunch of other kind of things. I'm super excited they're involved. So our speaker from philosophy is KATHLEEN CREEL. She graduated with her MA in 2015 from SFU, and she's currently pursuing a PhD. She's a doctoral candidate in the Department of History and Philosophy of Science at the University of Pittsburgh. And her research focuses on ethical and epistemic issues in computer science and machine learning. KATHLEEN, thank you so much for being here, and I'll just turn it over to you.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to share a slideshow as well. So let me just get that started. Thanks for the introduction. And as Steve mentioned, I came out of the SFU Department of Philosophy, which I had a really wonderful experience in. Like the other speakers have said, it really set me up for what I did later. So just to briefly sketch my trajectory, I did a master's at SFU ending in 2015, focusing on ethics, but also philosophy of science, causation, history of philosophy. So I'll explain how those are relevant for social data analytics in just a minute. Then I went on to pursue my PhD at Pittsburgh in history and philosophy of science, dealing with, again, topics of ethics and machine learning. And I recently have been offered, this is actually news to some people on the call, so sorry about that, but I'm now going to be defending my PhD in about a month and taking up a fellowship at Stanford, doing research in the Center for Ethics and Society, and teaching a really cool program there, which is called Embedded Ethics. So this is a pilot program that's been introduced at Harvard, and a number of universities are also rolling out. And so what happens is the computer science department has recognized that the various things that their graduates are doing that are high impact sometimes have positive high impact, sometimes have negative high impact. And so they are embedding ethics and also epistemology modules in all of their courses. So I'm going to be teaching those and designing the curriculum to help with that rollout. So let's see. So I just wanted to share a little bit about the philosophy side and the social side of social data analytics, touching a little bit on my research, but also more generally introducing some of the questions that you might be thinking about if you were taking philosophy courses as part of this minor. So one thing that happens a lot with data analytics is automation. So imagine if you were trying to hire, you're under a lot of constraints. You have time constraints, information constraints, privacy constraints, and also the feature space is underdefined, right? You don't know what is a good employee. How do you find a good employee? So as our previous speaker mentioned, in these cases where a human is doing something that takes a lot of time, it's often quite tempting to automate that process. So let's say we try to automate hiring. How does that work? So one thing that happens right now with companies like HireVue is that they will ask candidates to do a video interview, do some maybe online coding exercises, do some cognitive games, and then use that as a first cut to do a screen of interviews. So the hope here is that this will improve the process in some way, both by making it less resource intensive for the human, but also by reducing unconscious bias. The claim is that these systems will be less biased overall and hit whatever diversity targets the company has set. However, because they're automating, this also standardizes the process. So it means that instead of thousands of hiring managers, each applying their own individual judgment, now there's one algorithm that's being applied, often across a broad swath of companies. So one thing that can happen is that a candidate, a group of candidates, or people in some kind of intersectional category can get unjustly sort of lost in feature space, as we say. So if there's a complex algorithm, they can get stuck in some deep well of high dimensional space and be rejected from all the jobs they apply for, even though they might be quite qualified. And this can be really difficult to reconstruct or audit for unless you know what kind of thing to look for. So systems like this that automate hiring can bring up a lot of ethical issues, like the ones you would expect. Is my automated hiring system discriminating against members of any group, especially a protected group? Maybe ones that you might not expect. So even if that first thing isn't happening, is it arbitrarily excluding certain individuals in a systematic way? And then a lot of questions that come up that are at sort of the intersection of the epistemic, so the study of knowledge, and the ethical. So is it explainable? Does it give understandable reasons for its decision? And is it focusing on the right factors in making this decision? So other examples of this, which were mentioned earlier, Vasundhara mentioned, okay, we sometimes ask, is this system discriminating? We don't always ask, should we have made this system at all? I think that's a really valuable question. And some of the things that you can think about with philosophical and ethical tools are questions like that. So there's been a really interesting discussion about bias and facial recognition. So a group called Gender Shades pointed out that classification success on faces of color, especially darker skinned women of color, were very different than classification success for white men. But given that a lot of facial recognition systems are used for purposes that don't necessarily benefit the individual being classified, there was then a bigger discussion about, well, is facial recognition a good thing at all? And would fixing this disparity actually benefit this impacted group? So in thinking about questions like this, it can be really helpful to have some tools and some philosophical skills of analysis to think about what is discrimination, what is fairness, what would a fair outcome in this situation look like? And then practical ethics can give you a handle on how should fair or just or non-discriminatory systems be implemented. So another example of this is predictive policing. So I know that there are some students on the call who are interested in criminology. There have been a number of systems like PredPol that have been implemented in various police departments that purport to find hotspots of crime in the city and then direct resources, or in some cases, additional police officer presence to those hotspots. So one of the questions here is this legal? Is it ethical? But also, is it discriminatory? Does it reinforce existing biases in the criminal justice system? And is it sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy? Because if you have additional law enforcement officers walking around somewhere, they will probably find more minor crimes, no matter where they are, in which case the system will then create a feedback loop and cause more officers to be sent to the same place. So it could be that there is actually no underlying difference in the amount of crime in various locations, and nevertheless, the system would find purported hotspots. So if you were to take, for example, a philosophy of science class at SFU, you might read something by Ian Hacking, and you would talk about these looping effects. And you would gain skills in analyzing those sorts of problems and predicting them before they come up, instead of reacting and realizing, oh no, something we've done in our company or our branch of government or our nonprofit has caused some kind of ethical problem, and someone else has pointed it out, and now we have to react to it. Another sort of more philosophy of science or epistemic issue is this issue of explanation and transparency. So philosophy of science for a long time has looked at explanations, what makes a good explanation, This can be really interesting and important for large and complex computational systems like deep neural nets, which are considered quite opaque and which don't give the kinds of reasons for their predictions or their decisions that people might sometimes expect. So we can think about what makes a good explanation. Should a good explanation be true or just useful in a certain way? And who deserves to have transparent explanations? Something that the linguistics people can probably speak more to is ethics of design decisions. So for example, in implementing structures, you might have to choose between ASCII and Unicode. ASCII is based in English. Unicode is able to handle a much wider range of languages and symbols, but it takes up more storage space. So these are the kinds of design decisions around inclusion that people have to make on a daily basis, and that having some background in social data can help you consider. So I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but possible sort of philosophy-oriented data paths include data analytics for social good, government, responsible AI. There are actually a lot of roles for people within large companies who are trying to audit their systems for responsibility, fairness, things like that. And then of course, what I'm going to be doing this year, which is teaching data ethics. So if you want some philosophy courses while you anxiously anticipate the rollout of the social data analytics program in the spring, in the fall, there's Philosophy 120, Moral and Legal Problems, Philosophy 121, Global Justice, very cool course, and Intro to Philosophy of Science, Philosophy 144, where you can learn about some of these issues of explanation and justification. And that can help you prepare for SDA 270 in the spring. So thanks very much. As other speakers said, I'm happy if you want to reach out to me by email, screenshot my email or write it down. And looking forward to your questions.
Okay, Katie, thank you so much. And quite a few people have written congratulations to you about the job. I want to say congratulations to you too. I know it's such a big deal, especially since the certainty of, during COVID, and it's the academic job market's all in tatters. So big accomplishment and congratulations. So that was our final speaker, and now we're going to open it up for questions. I think we have about 10 to 15 minutes, and I think, am I responsible for monitoring this? If you have a question, I think.
Yeah, people can either put it in the chat room, or you can just unmute yourself and ask a question to either to Steve or to any of the speakers. We also have our economics advisor and also our linguistics advisor here on the Zoom session. So if any specific questions that relates more to the economics program or the linguistics program, please feel free to ask them. And also in the meantime, while we wait for questions from people, I'm going to launch a poll because I'm curious to find out what are the majors from the students who are in this call. So I'm going to launch it right now. So you should see a poll. And if you selected other, and if you're comfortable doing so, please put it in the chat room just so we see what major you're from. Oh, Steve, we have a question here. Would there be other intakes beyond spring 2021?
Yes, there definitely will be additional intakes. There'll be at least one intake per year, first of all. We expect, so we'll do the application procedure here for September 30th. That would be the initial run. If we get to 30, we'll stop and wait till next year. And if not, though, we'll probably do a second call in the spring. So that's sort of our plan. And then, if we can if we see robust demand and there's sufficient resources, we expect to expand the program. And so then each year there'll be a new intake, probably around September. Okay, so someone has asked me to give a little special plug for some psych courses. There's some special topics courses in 391 on data visualization. You know, these are courses that aren't formally listed as part of the major, or sorry, the minor, but students do have the option of petitioning to have courses count toward it that aren't listed, and that would be something that you would have to ask and petition myself for as the current director, and then we'll make a decision. You know, there are a lot of courses across the university that fit under social data analytics, broadly understood, and as you can hear from each of the speakers, that's intentional. You know, there's a real interdisciplinary aspect to that. We have sought in creating this program to limit the number of courses that any individual one department could offer to count toward the minor itself, so that it wasn't simply overwhelming for students. But if you are an entrepreneurial student and you say, hey, I'm taking this class, and this really fits with this, then you know what, we will probably be accommodating. You'll have to submit a syllabus and an explanation why, but we can talk about that. So check out psychology. We would love to. We would have loved to have psychology involved in this program, by the way. Questions for any of the speakers? Well, I have a question. So all of you, well, we're social science majors or arts majors, and then one of you has background in computing science. Do you feel like when you got to your place of employment, did you feel behind? Do you feel like you don't have the necessary technical skills? A lot of you talked about like data visualization, and that it sort of actually maybe de-emphasizing the technical aspects. Would you say that that's is that fair, or do you also sometimes feel like, oh, well, you wish you had more technical training? Yeah. So that's just open questions maybe for Jorge, VANNA, and
yeah. I can give a quick answer. I think, of course, like having more technical knowledge is always useful. Like it would have never hurt to have that knowledge. However, like as you think how fast analytics is progressing in the world, right? Like as I said, like R is one of the primary languages when you have Python. Then you actually have a new language that is called Julia, that is taking a lot of like emphasis. More than like being great at knowing the specific technical skills, I think it's being great at learning new skills really fast. So something that I try to teach my analysts and my team is like, I want you to be comfortable being uncomfortable all the time and not knowing how to do things, because that is probably how you will be in a year, 2 years, 3 years from now. So it's more than like being really technical, it's like knowing how to learn the technical skills, probably more important than being technical as you graduate. And I feel like, at least in my case, like taking 499 did help me significantly, because I had to learn R and it was heavy coding, and it was the first time that I was exposed to coding, and actually I've learned a lot more since I left that, because now I do SQL, to do data visualization, you actually need to learn like the languages within depending on the program that it is, ClearView, Power BI, depending on how you're visualizing the different languages. But it's all about the mindset and like knowing how to learn new things more than the specific technical things themselves, if that makes sense. That's my view, at least from a workplace, private sector perspective. I don't know what my fellow panelists believe.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, my situation's a little bit unique because I pretty much work with only social scientists who have a similar kind of situation. And then we have some like dedicated programmers. But I mean, I always think, wouldn't it be nice if I had a computer science degree? Of course, right? Because you always want more and more and more and more technical skill. But I would absolutely agree that it's for me, it's been less about coming in and having those skills and more about being able to develop them quickly. And in my case, also communicate them to other people that I work with to help get everybody on board on kind of new or different things that we hadn't been doing before. I spend a lot of the time doing kind of business development type work, you know, particularly with text analysis. So I'm always looking at kind of new ways to bring text analysis to the company. And I didn't have to know all those things ahead of time, but my ability to kind of absorb that information and apply it quickly is kind of the most valuable thing to me. But I always wish that I had done more, but I think anybody would.
Yeah, so I definitely, when I started off at work, did not feel that I was underqualified, because I think going into it, I knew how to program in like 7 different languages, including the main languages used at the company. So that wasn't so much a problem for me, but I do want to echo what Jorge said, that, you know, things are going to change. That's just how tech is. The big language of the past is not necessarily going to be the big language of the present or the future, and things are constantly in flux. So just because my company uses a lot of Python and SQL now doesn't mean that, you know, 5 years from now, we're not going to be switched mostly to Julia, because Julia is a really great language. And so I completely agree with that point, that you need to be very comfortable learning new languages and new techniques. However, I will also say that it is very helpful to get some basic programming skills. And I want to encourage you all to actually do that and not be scared of it, because I was actually very scared despite having actually done computing science as a major. When I got into it, I was under the impression that everyone who was a computing science major was like a hacker in high school. And I was the only one who had never programmed before university. Now, that wasn't actually entirely true. Like, yeah, there were lots of people who knew they liked computers and that's why they got into computer science, but there were lots of people like me as well who had no background. And yes, it was hard. After a year in the program, I was considering quitting because I was doing really well in linguistics, and in computing science, it was hard. But I stuck with it, and I'm really glad that I did. And at some point, things just clicked. And then when you understand the fundamentals of how programming works and how computers work, then the specific language that you're using doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I should add that, you know, we talked about this when we structured the program, so that there is R courses and there are Python courses, but what we struggled with is knowing that this is always in flux. So we thought that these were the kind of courses that were where our skill sets were now for the people who were faculty that were teaching. You know, I think the point about learning from a program perspective is it's not just about learning sort of the technical aspects of coding. Like, you know, learning to do that kind of also teaches you to understand more sort of systematically what you're actually doing and why you're doing it. And so that's something that's why we want to do that. Now, I think that's most obvious in something, for those who are familiar with a program like SPSS versus R, where SPS is a kind of point and click program where you know, I learned on SPSS, lots of people did it. But it wasn't really that until I started using R that I kind of really understood more and was more comfortable maybe with the math behind it rather than just pointing and clicking. And I think that's really what we're after in structuring the program, to include coding and computer languages. So, any other questions? Any questions?
Steve, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the statistical analysis in the program.
Sure. I mean, you know, I think it's good to look at like what all the courses are. I mean, we have computer programming courses, we have statistics courses, we have data visualization courses. You know, 2 really cool data visualization courses, I think, that are just coming online in the fall, although they've been offered as special topics. One of those is by myself in political science, the other one's in economics. That's an important part of it. You know, I think in some ways statistics is a natural discipline for it, but data science as a whole is kind of way bigger than statistics. And so statistics is an important part of this, the statistical analysis. But I think as you'll talk, you know, you'll hear from other people talking about it, it's like, you know, at the end of the day, like, well, statistics was developed really as a discipline and focused on a discipline to extract maximum information from limited data. We no longer have that problem. We have maximum data and we need more efficient ways to test. And I think that's why you hear the speakers talking about things other than statistics for the most part. They're talking about experiments, they're talking about ethics, they're talking about like the 5 terabytes of data that comes on to Best Buy's sites, and the natural experience that you as a customer are participating on, and that Jorge and his team are designing. Those things seem to me to be much more important. Everyone here I think does have some statistical background, and statistics is a part of this program, no doubt about that. But I think one of the ways we structured the program is to make that be one part of it, but also to lay the foundation so that we can also expand appropriately with where data science is, data analytics is, and where it might be going.